Hey, everybody. So, Kevin Spacey went on Piers Morgan's channel. The level of controversy that is happening right now and just people's feelings over Kevin Spacey is very interesting. We got to talk about it. So, I have several timestamps on my sticky notes that we have to review. If you guys don't know, I did a video maybe I want to say a couple weeks ago on Spacey Unmasked. It was this docu-series that interviewed several alleged Kevin Spacey victims. Now I say alleged because at this point Kevin Spacey has been, I guess, found not guilty in both civil and criminal court of any of these allegations. He's been able to dispel a lot. And while he was in this interview with Piers Morgan, y'all, he brought receipts. So we have to talk about those receipts that he brought. And we got to review these timestamps on my sticky notes. Now, for those that are new, in 2017, a man by the name of Anthony Rapp said that Kevin Spacey had done stuff to him, okay, when he was just 14 years old. And it literally set the internet and Hollywood into a firestorm when all this happened, because shortly after those allegations, Kevin Spacey decides to address those allegations in the same, I don't know, Twitter post or something, where he also addresses Anthony Rapp and tells the world that he is gay, basically comes out as a gay man. I want you guys to let me know your thoughts in the comments, because he literally goes into the whole the two people that died that were making accusations against him. He goes into that, and then he goes into the Epstein situation with the Clintons. I mean, he really goes there, and I was a little surprised that he went there, and I'm all here for it. Let's review it. Let's go. Now, the first alleged victim is Anthony Rapp, and Anthony Rapp alleged that when he was 14 years old, he had an encounter with Kevin Spacey. And so he goes into this interview addressing that first part.
First response was to ask myself, did I do something embarrassing? Now, he did say he thought I was trying to get with him sexually, but he did not in any way make any sexual assault allegation against me. He didn't do that until he filed a civil lawsuit.
And he filed a $40 million lawsuit in a Manhattan federal court. But the jury took little over an hour to come back and find you not guilty. And in closing arguments, your lawyer said that Rapp had made up the encounter and suggested reasons why he made that. It may be possible, she said, that Rapp invented it based on his experience performing in Precious Sons, a play in which actor Ed Harris picks up Rapp's character and lays on top of him, mistaking him briefly for his wife before discovering it's his son. They came back in just over an hour, and the court ordered Rapp, the accuser, to pay you £40,000. We have a check, I think, a picture of the check at the time. So it's an emphatic, clear victory for you. But it also, to me, again, when I look back at the statement you made, if you just hadn't made that statement in the way you made it, then...
And Piers is referring to the statement where, you know, he's addressing Anthony Rapp's allegation in addition to telling the world that he's gay. I don't want to speak for the LGBTQAI plus community. I would imagine that having somebody come out in a, you know, such as a public figure like Kevin Spacey, you know, expressing where he's at, and then in addition to addressing the allegations in the same paragraph or in the same blog posts or Twitter, would probably not be a good idea, because it probably didn't sit well with a lot of folks from all areas.
Then your next few years could have been very different. I'm not saying they would have been, but they could have been.
I accept that it was a poorly thought through statement. And but again, I hope the fact that I'm not guilty of what I was accused of will, at least in hindsight, make people understand why I might have made it. And I also just would add that I hope that someday Anthony Rapp can accept that he had a faulty memory. That's what I would like to believe.
Have you had any
happened.
contact with him?
I have had no contact with him. But I would like to believe that at some point he'll recognize that with all the evidence that we presented at trial, which is why we were able to have the outcome that we did, that he will look back on this and say that his memory was faulty. And I think if he did that, that would go a long way to, I think, heal himself and also be healing for me.
One of the key...
Okay, so let me just say this. I don't know. I don't have the evidence that they showed in court to say, you know, this is what it was. I am curious to know what they saw. And I think that this is a part where conviction by social media. Like, we really need to come together and see, like, what is it that's out there to figure out, this man and his situation. Do you guys believe that Anthony Rapp is a victim of Kevin Spacey? Again, he's been exonerated both in the civil matter and in the criminal court. What do you guys feel in the comments? Let me know, because let me just say this. Somebody in the comments, and they made a very interesting comment that I gotta read. And I kind of have to agree with them on this one too, because I don't know, like, I look at Kevin Spacey sometimes and I don't know if I'm getting Kevin Spacey the person or Kevin Spacey the act. Why do I feel like I'm watching a movie about Kevin Spacey where Kevin Spacey is playing Kevin Spacey? I share the same thoughts about that too. I feel like I'm watching Kevin Spacey play Kevin Spacey. Am I the only one who feels that way? Let me know. Let's keep watching.
The reasons that I think it led to such an emphatic decision by the jury was John Barrowman, an actor well known in the UK, stepped forward for you. He was about 19 at the time, I think, and he was there
Yes.
at the same time.
Yes.
And he was emphatic that this just didn't happen.
Well, he was emphatic about the fact that really the foundation for Anthony's claim was that he had gone to a party that I had thrown where he had escaped into a bedroom, and that later I came into that bedroom and swayed in a doorway. Well, I had no bedroom. There was no doorway. There was no party. And the only time that he was in my apartment was with John Barrowman after we had had dinner together and they wanted to come and meet my dog. So again, I think there must be reasons why this happened. And I'm trying as best I can in a lot of these cases to seek understanding and not judgment. My best friend in this world and manager, Evan Lowenstein, has worked very hard with me over these years to try to help me get to a place where I come out the other side of this, not bitter, not angry, not revengeful, but more compassionate, having more empathy, more understanding, being more present, and working on myself in all the ways that I have.
What was going through your head when this all was going down in the first few days? Because you were the double Oscar winner, star of one of the biggest shows on television around the world, House of Cards, and then suddenly, you're talking to Ridley Scott about this big movie. It's everything. Life could not have been going better for you.
Yes, double Oscar winner, but I think what Piers needs to understand is the public is tired of hiding shit or giving notoriety to people that I'm not saying are not deserving of it, but it doesn't matter if you have an Oscar or whatever. You could still be a shitty person or do stupid things in Hollywood or be part of various things. Like, we just saw what we saw with Diddy, right? Here you have somebody who is successful, a mogul, all this other stuff, denied everything that he did to Cassie. And I'm not saying that Kevin Spacey is Diddy. What I'm saying is that we need to stop putting these people in these pedestals of, like, here you are, this badass, double Academy Award winning Oscar guy, can do no wrong. No. What are we doing here? They can do very wrong. If anything, they hide behind that. Just a thought. But y'all let me know your thoughts in the comments.
I went into rehab. I immediately, I didn't know if I was going to survive, and I just needed to go take care of myself. And I was enormously grateful that Evan encouraged me to go do that.
Do you think what would have happened if you hadn't done that?
I don't know. It was a very unusual experience for me because I'd never been in therapy. I'd never looked into myself in the ways that I was being asked to. I remember there was maybe the first or second day that I was there, one of the guys that had been assigned to me as sort of my angel, my big brother. He looked at me at lunch one day and he said, Kevin, if you're going to get out of this program, what you came here to get out of this program, you're probably going to have to do something you've never done in your entire life. And I was like, oh yeah, what would that be? He said, trust before you're ready.
I didn't know that he went to rehab. That's interesting. I think that's very interesting. So the likelihood of him offending or having victims while he was under the influence is very high. So for there to be denial of things that happen, you do have to kind of wonder, how often has he done things and not necessarily been aware of it or been cognizant of that, given that he is, he has an issue. I'm assuming it's alcohol because he said he went to rehab. I believe a lot of the allegations have surrounded alcohol too. So now this is the part where he addresses his relationship with his parents. I did talk a little bit about that, about his dad being kind of like this Nazi enthusiast, I guess, or whatever. Like, at least that's how he was presented in Spacey Unmasked. I showed a little clip on that. Make sure you guys check it out. But this is interesting. What he says about his family and his upbringing.
But I've also had to re-examine my relationship with my mother. I've had to ask questions about things that I had for a long time, my whole life, never dealt with. And that was that she didn't protect me from my father. I love her. And I was very glad that I was able to thank her in that speech and thank Jack Lemmon in the one for American Beauty.
Your actual father was a monstrous man. I mean, he was a Nazi sympathizer, a white supremacist. There's all sorts of epithets you can give him. He was brutal, physically brutal, although not to you, I think mainly to your brother. By all accounts, an awful father to you. And when you say that your mother should have been more protective, could she have been, do you think? Or was he so monstrous that it would almost have been impossible?
Piers drives me crazy sometimes because I feel like he's filling in the blanks for Kevin. Like, let Kevin say what he has to say about his own father. He would have known him. Like, stop it, Piers. You drive me crazy when you do this shit.
I absolutely think she could have. And I'm not willing to remove her responsibility. I was very fortunate that my sister told me repeatedly, don't listen to him. He's crazy. My mother's attitude was, oh, he just needs to get it off his chest.
He was very homophobic as well.
He was, yes. And I experienced that directly.
Did you know you were gay when he was doing that?
I don't think I knew what I was. I think I knew I felt things and I was emotional when I was that young. But
Kevin Spacey's brother has alleged that his father basically essayed him, the brother, not Kevin Spacey. So he has made some pretty heinous allegations against a lot of people within the family, my understanding. But, you know, Kevin Spacey doesn't really address that in this interview too much about what happened with his brother and his father. But that was something that was brought up in Spacey Unmasked, where a lot of us had a lot of, at least for me, I had a lot of questions about that whole dynamic. Kevin right now, he's not close to his brother. They're very much divided. Kevin's brother is a Rod Stewart impersonator. I think that's the word. Yeah, he impersonates him. So it's very interesting to see kind of like Kevin Spacey, double Academy Award winner, right? Like actor, and then brother who's a Rod Stewart impersonator. And it's like, whoa, you know, they came from a family, whether it was intentional or not. It sounds like performance was a huge thing, or at least the thing that they used to shield themselves from whatever was going on at home. I don't know about his sister too much because they didn't really go into it that much in the Kevin Spacey Unmasked, but I am kind of curious about that dynamic.
you know, I've tried as best as I can to see the journey that he took from being a medic in World War II and serving the United States as patriotically as any young soldier had, and going through his albums and going through his diaries and seeing what he wrote about what he felt when he went to Germany after the war, and the slow indoctrination that happened to him with a number of people who came into his life, and how he found a reason that he wasn't able to succeed as the great creative writer he wanted to be. It's a sad and long journey, but I also need to seek forgiveness.
Kevin Spacey always gets worked up when it comes to his parents, at least speaking about them.
I mean, yes, he lectured me and my sister and my brother for hours and hours and hours and hours about his beliefs. And it was, you know, for me, I was so afraid to bring my friends home. I mean, my best friend, Mike, who's still my great friend to this day, I was afraid to bring him home because he was Jewish.
Let's still head on with some of the cases. One was Los Angeles masseurs who didn't want to be named, claimed that you had groped him at a house in Malibu in California, sued you for sexual battery, gender violence, battery assault, intentional infliction of emotional distress and false imprisonment, and then died before the legal action reached court. What do you want to say about that?
So, by the way, his accusers, I think at least two of his accusers have died in very interesting circumstances, things that have happened. I think it happened all in 1 year in 2019, if I remember correctly. There have been multiple accusers of Kevin Spacey. And I am kind of wondering, did all of them make it to court? Because when you watch Spacey Unmasked, there were multiple people that had so many stories about Kevin Spacey. And I do kind of question is, were all of them involved in court, or was it just like an experience that they had? What exactly was this exactly?
Well,
Because as you know, social media was ablaze after that. This was all obviously a sinister thing. Maybe this guy had been shut up, blah, 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 the usual
Yes.
stuff.
Well, they're actually.
But in terms of the legality of the case,
Right.
what is your response to it?
My response to it is that we had irrefutable evidence to show that I wasn't even in the state of California when he made this accusation had occurred. And we were very confident that we were going to be able to present, as we have in other cases, that evidence. I also would simply say this was a man who was over 60 years old. And so there's lots of stories about me, enjoying the company of younger men. So this was the first time I was accused of abusing a senior citizen.
Wow.
And, we found out from his family that he had cancer prior to filing that civil suit, and he died of cancer. And, it was sad, but we never had the opportunity to go in front of the court and to prove our innocence. There have been a couple of other stories about alleged accusers who also passed away,
Right.
which are entirely not true. In the first place, one of those people was not an accuser. She was a stalker, and in fact stalked me for many years, sent white powder in the mail to the Old Vic Theater, called in bomb threats to the Old Vic Theater. We had to evacuate the theater on a number of occasions, and threatened my life. And she was arrested, charged, and convicted in a court in the United States and served more than 4 years in prison. And when she got out of prison, she started making more threats. And it was being examined by the court whether she was going to go back to prison when she was hit by a car and died of her injuries. And there was someone else who had told a funny story about.
Now, let me stop right here. I had done a search because I wanted to know if Kevin Spacey had a stalk, like the way he's describing this woman. I do remember hearing about the woman that was the only woman accuser that was like a witness. She wasn't the victim. She was like a witness. Now, if she was convicted of stalking, I don't know how she would be a witness of anything, right? So Kevin Spacey, stalker. And I was able to pull, and this is the name of the woman too. Her name is Linda Louise Cullen, 55, a woman who engaged in a persistent, malevolent cyber stalking campaign against actor Kevin Spacey, has been sentenced to 4 years, threatened to physically cause the harm to the House of Cards star. And I'm pretty sure that it was Linda who, he's referring to Linda who died. Yep, because she died in 2019. So she was hit by a car Monday night while crossing a street. Okay. Melinda Cullen, who was convicted in 2013 of making bombs, anthrax, and other death threats, was struck around 7:30 p.m. Okay. So this woman right here was the one that Kevin Spacey is alleging stalked him. Now, how she was supposed to testify, I'm not really like, was she a witness or did she die under that circumstance? But I didn't know that this woman had been convicted of stalking. So that's new to me when I was, looking into this interview. No clue whatsoever. And she happened to die in 2019. Let me know your thoughts in the comments about that, y'all.
About having had an encounter with me in which I made a pass at him. He told it in a very jokey way. And then sadly, he'd been an individual who had a lot of issues and a lot of substance abuse, and he was fighting back and talking about mental health. And he had a book that he'd written. And in that radio interview, he told this story. A year later, when he sadly took his own life, someone then said that he'd accused me of this, that he was a victim.
And he, I believe, was the one that committed suicide, the same accuser that we spoke about in the other video.
And there was no court case with him. There was no court case with this woman who was a stalker. So this is just internet, conspiracy theories.
On the criminal trial, you were charged with 9 sexual offences against 4 men between 2004 and 2013. And you were found not guilty on all counts. Now, a criminal trial is, by definition, a lot more serious than a civil case. Civil case, the bar can be a lot lower for guilt. And you were found not guilty there. When you're facing a criminal trial of that magnitude, had you been found guilty on all counts, I mean, you would likely have gone to prison for a considerable period of time.
Exactly.
I believe so, yes.
Did that thought
He would have been right there with Danny Masterson.
play on your mind a lot? I mean, how does that feel? You're an Oscar-winning actor, and suddenly you're facing a trial where someone may take your liberty away for years.
Only if we'd had a crazy jury.
But what your critics would say is, well, maybe not, but you're Kevin Spacey. And if you're an 18, 19, 20-year-old young male actor, and Kevin Spacey is fluttering his drunken eyelashes at you, for want of a better phrase.
Yeah, that was very nice. I like
that. In a way that in itself can constitute an abuse of power, even if you don't intend it to. But there is a presumption from the young actor in that position?
A lot of the allegations stem from Kevin Spacey promising roles in movies or whatever acting roles for people, for men specifically. These were things that Kevin Spacey was promising to various victims. It's interesting because when you listen to Spacey Unmasked and the way these victims speak about, they have a very similar encounter and story with Kevin Spacey. So I'm glad that this is being asked, but I mean, how often do you not hear it in Hollywood with somebody in a position of power, which would be Kevin Spacey or a producer, Weinstein or whatever it may be, or Diddy, promises something in exchange for something else? It does happen, right? Do we ignore patterns of the statements from the victims? What do you guys think?
A more powerful man, a famous man, a double Oscar winner is using all that to seduce someone. Do you accept that?
I can understand that perspective. I truly can. But at the same time, I'm a human being. And if I fall in love with somebody across a room, then am I not supposed to go and have a conversation with them or see if they're interested because I'm famous?
There's a difference there, Kevin. There's a difference between being at a bar and finding somebody attractive versus being in a studio or at the set of a movie or whatever it may be, and then using your charm to seduce somebody and therefore promise something in exchange. Like that is the difference, honestly. So I don't think that the question is, can you hit on someone or can you not hit on someone? The question is, did you do a quick pro quo in such situations when it came to people that were trying to come up in the Hollywood scene? He can't seem to answer that, in my opinion. But y'all listen to what he says.
Because look, I'm sure you have heard countless stories about relationships that began with one of the parties being more aggressive than the other.
Well, 40% of all marriages historically began in the workplace. Historically, with an older man in a superior position to a slightly younger woman. That was just the nature of the workplace. Now it's very difficult to see how those numbers could possibly be happening because people are pretty much not allowed to have any workplace relationships. So it's been a massive societal change, which many think has gone too far. Do you think the pendulum post-Me Too, you were caught up in that first wave, the hysterical first wave that saw many people taken down, but do you think it's gone too far?
See, this is like, I'm lost here. It's not that this wasn't a good interview. I just feel like we're not really answering the questions. He's answering the questions. Piers is answering the questions. Like, the aggressive encounter is there. Sure. Do people go for it when it comes to hitting on someone? I mean, if y'all have been in that position, or I'll speak for myself, if I've been in that position, sure, but I've also been in the position where, like, you pick up these social cues, or like you're like, hey, this person's with somebody, clearly it's not going to go anywhere, or they're not interested. But why would you take it to the extent of promising a job? Forget the aggressive part. Like, I feel like we're mixing apples to oranges here, or we're comparing them, and it's not the same, you guys. It just isn't.
Say yes, and not just in my particular case. There have been others that I feel, they may have been inappropriate. They may have done something that they wish they hadn't done, but I didn't think that what it was, and maybe what they even admitted to, was so heinous that they should have lost their career or their ability to make their livelihood. I think that is too far. But I also think we have to be mindful that it doesn't swing back too far in the other direction, because you mentioned in 2017 the Harvey Weinstein investigation, I think had impact. I think Me Too had impact, because the New York Times, its journalists, its editors, Ronan Farrow, and the people he was working with, they investigated those claims for more than a year before they went to print. They were confident at what they had.
Did you know Harvey Weinstein was that character?
Sure. Yeah.
You did?
Yeah, I did a couple movies for Miramax.
But did you know what he was like?
I knew I had a lot of arguments with him, but I didn't know anything about what was going on privately. No, not at all.
People have tried to lump you in with him. How do you feel about that?
I try to understand that people want to resolve things very quickly. And all Evan and I have been working on for a long time, is asking people to ask questions, to find out, to not believe a headline that you might read. I mean, I see all kinds of things that people say they believe is true, and there's no truth to it whatsoever.
When you yourself, as you did a few minutes ago, you talk about bad behavior that you committed. What do you mean by that? What's your idea of bad behavior when you look back at what you were doing?
Pushing the boundaries.
In what way? I mean,
being too handsy, touching someone sexually,
groping people
in a way that I didn't know at the time they didn't want.
Some people would say that is criminal. That if you grope people in a sexual way against their wishes, that is a crime.
I agree that the word grope is a very odd word. I personally, I have caressed people. I have been gentle with people. That is the way that I am. You're making a pass at someone. You don't want to be aggressive. You want to be gentle. You want to see if they're going to respond positively.
Oh man, this is troublesome for me. Okay, let's go to the definition of groping. Y'all Google search grope and it says grope. It says feel about or search blindly, uncertainly with the hands. Feel or fondle someone for sexual pleasure, especially against their will. Typically, groping is, that's how I understand it. It's against your will. Groping is not caressing. Sexual gratification that comes out of that. Yeah, that's my thought on that.
So I think the word itself is not a word that I associate with my experience.
But would you say all of that was consensual, or was it an attempt at seduction that, if it was repelled, by definition becomes, I guess, non-consensual? That if you're being handsy, if you're groping people, and they don't want to do it,
then they should let you know they don't want to do it, so that you can understand it's non-consensual and stop.
So that brings me back to the point I made.
Oh, okay. So does Kevin Spacey here admit that there might have been some groping or handsy or her caressing that might have been non-consensual? Did he not receive from the other party, like, stop, I don't like this? Is this what he's saying? See, this right here kind of confused me a bit because I wasn't really sure what he was saying here. I mean, other than the fact that he's been exonerated from the criminal and the civil case, like, what do we make here? This is an awkward moment, I think, in my opinion.
I made about if they're a young male actor and it's Kevin Spacey and he's had a few drinks and they're in the bar late at night and he gropes a young male actor, and they may feel they don't want to be part of that. They don't like what's going on, but they don't want to tell you because you're Kevin Spacey and it might damage their career.
Exactly.
Do you understand how people could think that if they were young and impressionable, keen to get on in their careers?
That is the position of power. That is that, like, I'm an actor and I make millions versus you're starting out in the business. This is what I think is at shift. And that's not to say that Kevin Spacey can't date or any actor or actress can't date, but they do need to be careful about things like this. He at least would have to understand how careful he would have to be.
And making a vow that will never happen again for the rest of my life. I will never behave in the ways that I did previously, ever.
So he does admit to being handsy. I mean, this is where I get confused, y'all. But maybe I'm overthinking this too much, and I do tend to do that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Now we're going to get into the part where he talks about these victims and he's bringing these receipts.
Well, one of them was a Secret Service agent from the House of Cards called Daniel.
Yeah.
We got a clip of something he said in the documentary.
I leaned in because he was saying something to me, and then I felt something tickle me just right below my zipper, and I was like, what? I look down and I see it's his finger.
I remember this one right here. I remember this statement being made. Look at Kevin Spacey's face.
His hand touched my penis. It wasn't like us playing around in the locker room, a little joke or a little tap. It was sexual. I was touched. I was inappropriately touched on set at work. He just had these real dead eyes looking at me, and I just felt like I was staring into like a soulless monster.
He worked on the show for 4 years. What's your response to that? What do you feel about that?
I know who that is. We had a lot of fun together. When he left the show, we were emailing to each other. In fact, in one of our flirty emails, which we had, I asked him to send me, he was talking about working out, he was getting buff, and I said, send me a picture. And he sent me a couple of pictures that were naked and provocative.
Hold up. Okay. In the Spacey Unmasked docuseries, this alleged victim never says that. He never says he messages him. He never says anything like that whatsoever. Nothing. So that is a new and a first to me to hear this. Now, this is where Kevin, I think, misses the point and the mark. Kevin, you are the main actor in House of Cards, right? The main role. This guy is just, I don't know, like a fill in the blank type of character. Like, this is where you would have to be careful. Like, you have somebody that, is close to the writers, producers, executive directors, all these people asking you to send pictures of, like, I'm like, oh my God, of course. Like, Kevin Spacey says to send you a picture. Sure. Why wouldn't he do it? This is put himself in a very stupid position, in my opinion, here, to even entertain or engage this by asking him to send him a picture.
He voluntarily sent you those
Yeah, he
pictures.
sent me these. This is now, this allegation he makes, I believe, was in 2013, because I know the scene he's talking about. And I know when we shot that scene.
Oh my God.
And this is now 2016. So that's 2013. This is now 2016. And we're like talking about getting together, and he's sending me these kind of pictures. And you just,
whoa. So I remembered that accuser. Like, oh my God, why would you send, like, listen, what do you guys think? Kevin brought the receipts for that accuser.
and you just go, oh, okay, so which is true, Daniel? I think it's very clear what's true. And by the way, can I just also say, I don't know why Channel 4 has not yet told the British public if they pay these individuals to tell these stories. My brother's been paid a number of times for telling false and crazy stories. So we know that
I think it's important to say whether they've been paid or not. I would agree with that. I think it's important. I mean, money motivates people too. So yeah, why not?
approached people and said they would pay them. So did they pay these individuals for telling these stories?
Did they know about these pictures and the emails and years off?
How could they? No, what they did was, instead of coming to us in a reasonable fashion and saying, listen, we're thinking of airing this thing in 3 months or 4 months. We want to give you an opportunity to respond to these. I would have then gone and found those emails. I would have shown them those emails. We would have said, guys, if you're going to present a story, present the whole story.
I mean, just coming to this call, when I saw the evidence that you provided, it just seems completely ridiculous. If he's doing that 3 years later, how traumatized can he really be by what he claims happened in this incident in 2013?
There are a number of others in the Channel 4 documentary whom we have also found exchanges between me and them. And in one case, years after.
Well, we have an example.
There were a number of accusers on that Spacey Unmasked that need to be reviewed. Like, that needs to be exposed too. We all need to look at both sides. Both sides.
A former Marine called Scott, who alleged this in the documentary.
All of a sudden, there's some activity happening next to me, and kind of glance over, and Kevin's just pleasuring himself. You know, some of the most horrific war footage ever recreated. Like, there's no way that this is happening, that this guy is rubbing one out during the invasion of Normandy. And finally, he reaches over and grabs my hand and tries to get me to help out. I was like, no, this is crazy.
By the way, that accuser is a vet. So has he been discredited? Did something happen here? Like, who's telling the truth here?
So he's a gigantic Marine who presumably has fought in wars. But there are some salient points about this. Apparently you've never seen Saving Private Ryan.
No, I haven't.
So why is he saying this?
I mean, my last question, did he get paid for telling the story? I don't know. What I do know is that he claimed that this incident at the movies happened in 1998. I have an email from him in 2011. I have an email from him in 2013, in which he's not only in the 2011 one, says...
Hold up. Let me read this email. It says, a captain's duty. His name is Scott. And this was December 9th, 2011. Hey, bro, I hope things are going well with your play, and I'm glad we're able to catch up when you were in LA. I just came across a news article from A Captain's Duty that you said you guys were looking for military vets. I'd love to get in on this film like we talked about after the play, and I'm really glad you guys chose to hire vets. It makes a huge difference in so many ways. You can check out my new reels here. Thanks for keeping me in mind. I really hope we can get together soon and catch up.
How great it was to see me when I was just in Los Angeles. And I know I'd gone to Los Angeles at some point during the tour of Richard III. We apparently went to a play together, and he looked forward to seeing me again soon in the future. So
Again, to me, this is ridiculous. To you, it could have been life. I mean, it has been life-wrecking, but coming off the back, what was interesting to me, coming off the back of all these court cases you've been involved in, the reaction to this documentary was very interesting. You actually began to get a lot of support from journalists and then from people like Liam Neeson, Sharon Stone, and others who just saw through a lot of what they saw to be nonsensical. People who are victims of what they claim to be. I don't think a Marine voluntarily sends the cheery emails he's sending you years later if he genuinely experienced some great trauma watching a movie you say you've never watched.
Right.
What do you guys make of this? Like, how did all these men lie on Kevin Spacey? What do you guys think?
yes, I mean, Channel 4 presented this as if this was some deep dive, they called it forensic investigation. And at the center of this documentary, they used my brother. Now, my brother moved out of the house when he was 17. Mm-hmm. I then moved to New York to go to Juilliard when I was 19.
Mm-hmm.
And in all the years since, which is nearly 50 years, we have seen each other, even he admitted, maybe 4 times.
And he told stories about your mother.
Sold stories. I mean, yeah, what he's done to her is terrible. What he's done to me doesn't matter. The guy who drove me here, the Uber that you guys sent, I know that guy better than I know my brother.
Oh, Lord.
And he's out there telling all these stories and talking about how he knows me. And so that's the armchair psychologist that you use at the center of this documentary. And then
The brother is quite the character. Let me just say that much. And like, I do feel like we need to understand motive when it comes to some of these family members that are speaking, but that's just my opinion.
What I've seen, right? That's just with my journalist head on, just looking at stuff and saying this doesn't make sense.
And again,
now, notwithstanding that, you've been pretty honest about the inappropriate bad behaviors, you put it, the groping, which many times would have been unwanted and was rejected, and people will make a judgment about you about those admissions.
Do you guys think that Kevin Spacey has been honest about everything?
I think you're trying to portray yourself as some angelic character.
I'm
nor do I think you were, right? I mean, this is, I didn't see you in those days. When I saw you at a party, you certainly didn't do that to me, Kevin.
All right, now we're going to get into the whole President Clinton thing and the Epstein thing. We're going to get into it right now. Y'all let me know your thoughts about this
I
one.
want to talk to you about something slightly left field, but your name was attached to another big scandal, which was the Prince Andrew scandal. And famously, it was reported that you and Ghislaine Maxwell were invited to the throne room by Prince Andrew. It then got briefed that you may have been the one who invited Ghislaine Maxwell.
Wow.
What was the truth about?
I hadn't heard that one.
This is the throne room at Buckingham Palace. Just to be clear, who invited who to this?
Well, let me try to put this in context before I even get into that. In 2002, I got a call from President Clinton, who I had become friends with over many years, inviting me to come with him on an 8-day humanitarian trip that he was going to make to Africa and South Africa.
Okay, here we go.
And I thought it was an incredible opportunity. And apparently he was not having great success with getting people to say yes, because it wasn't like one night in New York. It was 8 days in Africa and South Africa. The fact that it was primarily to raise awareness and prevention for AIDS, and particularly for mothers who had HIV to get the medication they needed to not pass it on to their children. So I said yes, absolutely. And in September of 2002, we took off from New York and we went to Ghana and Mozambique and Zimbabwe and Rwanda and Johannesburg and Cape Town. And this was one of the most incredible experiences I've ever had. The doctors and nurses that we met, what we learned about how they were treating patients, the economic development that the president was also talking about in terms of Africa and where it was going to go in the future. The people we met, we spent a day with Nelson Mandela. It's one of the most extraordinary, just an incredible trip. Meant so much to me. And then the president was invited by Tony Blair to give the speech at Blackpool and Labour Party conference that year.
What was that?
So we flew then to London. And the president said to me, before we leave tomorrow, you want to come? I'm going to go to Buckingham Palace tomorrow and see Prince Andrew. You want to come?
Oh.
So I said, sure. So
Do you just do Bill Clinton's voice? Did y'all catch that?
I'm a part of the president's party, and there must have been, I think there were 21 guests of the Clinton Foundation when we went to Africa and South Africa. So like 18 or so people came to Buckingham Palace that morning. And we were wandering through, and there were people brought us into the throne room, and I sat down, and a bunch of people came and sat down next to me, and a bunch of pictures were taken. And then we went up and we met Prince Andrew. I'd never met him before and have not seen him since. So that's the context. Then President and I went up to Blackpool. In 2015, I started seeing reports online, things on my Twitter account that I had flown to this guy, Jeffrey Epstein's island, and I had abused young girls. And I was like, I mean, if you'd asked me in 2015, maybe even if you'd asked me in 2002, did I know a guy named Jeffrey Epstein? I probably would have said no. Well, of course, I have since learned who he is. And I have since been able to go back and find out that the airplane that we flew on for this humanitarian mission was owned by Jeffrey Epstein. And to then learn, oh, he was actually on some of those flights.
Oh.
And this Maxwell woman was on some of those flights. I didn't know him. I've never spent any time with him. I was with the Clinton Foundation people. That's who I was with.
Okay. Oh my God. What do y'all think about this? Listen, I know I'm gonna get a lot of comments about this, and I know you guys are gonna go in and listen. Feel free to go in, but I'm just saying, what do you guys think? He said he didn't know. He didn't know.
Now, what I understand is that he didn't start to be investigated until 2005 by authorities in Florida. So here's what I can tell you. This Maxwell woman, she was one of many people who sat down next to me in that throne room. I have no relationship with her. I had no relationship with him. I mean, he's not my friend. I'm not a confidant. I've never spent time with him. And interestingly, I will say this. I was very fortunate that President Clinton introduced me a lot of business leaders in London because he knew I was coming to the Old Vic. And I developed relationships with Robert Earl, Pula Ladovovich, Robert Earl, a lot of wonderful people, Sir Richard Caring, people who supported the work that we did at the Old Vic and gave money to us. Do you know who I never asked for anything? Was Jeffrey Epstein. I didn't want to be around this guy because I felt he put the president at risk on that trip to South Africa because there were these young girls. And we were like, who is this guy? So I will say this.
Pause. Pause, Kevin Spacey. When did you realize that he was putting the president at that time at risk? Was it during the trip, after the trip, when you found out about the investigation? When did he realize this? See, this is where I call BS right here. Pause, 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 pause. Bring it back. I have to side-eye you a little bit in here because I'm not this right here. I'm not a body language expert. And look, I just did a little reaction. Listen, this right here does not make sense to me whatsoever. When did he realize that he put the president at risk? He said underage girls. So who exactly, what was the context behind that? That doesn't make sense to me, you guys.
Say this.
There were young girls on those flights.
There were young girls on those flights, yeah. And that's been out there. They've talked about it. But here's my point. There's a big difference between not remembering that I met some guy and some woman on a humanitarian trip where my focus was entirely on what we were there to do, and not remembering whether I went to somebody's island. So I never went to Jeffrey Epstein's island. I did not know him, and I never saw him or her after that morning at Buckingham Palace. He didn't even come to Buckingham Palace.
Is it true that Prince Andrew sought your assistance and wanted you to testify that Ghislaine Maxwell was your guest, not his, during that Buckingham Palace tour?
I heard a report about that, but at no time did anyone ever contact me on his behalf. And as I say, I'm not friends with him. I never saw him after that day.
What do you think about what's happened to him?
I mean, I don't know anything about it. It's not, I'm not going to talk about someone else's scandal, you know. My point is that I had enough accusations of my own to deal with. I don't need to inherit someone else's.
And what would you say if there are young actors who had a bad experience with you, genuinely, over the years, while you're on a mission, when you behave badly, inappropriately? What message, if they're watching this, what message would you have specifically for them?
You're asking me to answer a very broad question, right, as if every single encounter I ever had in my life would allow me to want to say something to all of those people.
Well, no, let me be specific.
Yeah, if you're more specific, I think it's easier to answer that question.
So specifically, when you said you know there were times when you behaved badly,
yes,
when you groped people when you shouldn't have done, when you were too handsy, when they may not have wanted you to be.
Oh,
those people, the ones who genuinely didn't want you to do that, felt bad about it. What do you say to them?
I do not speak to them on television. What I do is I speak to them directly in person, and we have an intimate and genuine conversation.
Have you been doing that?
I have been doing that.
With how many?
With quite a few.
I mean, 10, 20, 30? No, I'm
How
curious.
many?
I'm not going to go down that road. I appreciate why you're asking.
But a significant number.
But a significant number.
Not just a handful.
No. And I would simply say this.
Whoa. You could just see that this is like, he was on a hot seat right here. I mean, he was on a hot seat overall, but here, right here, this struck a nerve for whatever reason it did.
Those conversations have been incredible. I think to put me in a position where you're now asking me to make a PR move,
Right.
very, very.
I'm actually more interested that you've been having the private conversations with these people.
Yes. And
What approach do you take when you have them?
they're private conversations. Paris.
Oh, so is there more to this or what?
I can just tell you that I'm grateful that people are talking to me. I'm grateful that they're sharing what they're sharing with me. I'm learning. I'm growing. And you know what? About the work, it never stops. I will be doing this work for the rest of my life.
You mean on yourself?
On myself. This is not something you go off and you get a diploma and then you come back and say, look at
Well,
me,
you
I did all the work.
famously, I mean, what's it's not funny because of the circumstances, but what's kind of ironic is that you were famously a very private guy. You said that at the start. And if I'd interviewed you 15 years ago, we would not have been going anywhere near any of this stuff.
We also would have been 10 minutes.
Right. No, but that literally, I mean, you would not have subjected yourself to such a forensic conversation about you, your character, your life, your mistakes, and so on. Is it?
I don't know if I think that that was a forensic conversation. First of all, it shouldn't have been a forensic conversation given that it's in a public platform. But it did make me think a lot about the accusers and what they're alleging, what evidence they had to present in courts to exonerate both in the civil and in the criminal matter. I am kind of questioning that. I want to know what you guys think in the comments about this whole situation. You guys feel like what has happened to Kevin Spacey has been unfair? What has happened to the victims has been unfair? What has been fair out of all of this? And are we ever really going to know the truth between what happened or not? I do think that he kind of skated through some of the questions, didn't really want to get into certain things, and this is supposed to be kind of a tell-all, but he's done other interviews too, so I give you that. I will see you guys on the next one. Rabbits out. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and make sure you hit that damn like button or dislike, whatever. Rabbits out. Bye, guys.